Hi, it's Ingram, and we're going to talk about, we should actually turn that television set off or down or something over there too, because I suddenly realized we got a television set going in the other room. And we're here to talk tonight. We're going to talk scientific research tax credits, a little bit different. We're going to talk our U.S.-Canadian investment with Dan Walco at 7 o'clock. And we got Brian here talking about charitable giving and how to get the best bang for your buck if you're going to give to a charity, particularly if you've got stock or mutual funds or something. But we're going to start off talking about how to get free money, which is why I have a Santa Claus hat on and why my guest Richard Moore has a Santa Claus hat on. And I guess we're both from, now were you born in Kelowna, Richard?
I was, David, yes, in Kelowna, and when Kelowna was a very small town, and the lake was pristine, and there were hardly any people there. It was a beautiful place.
Man, Ogopogo was
flipping
there around. Yeah. He was having fun.
And I used to swim in the lake when there was no milfoil there, and there were hardly any people, and the kokanee were roaring up the Mission Creek, and you could almost walk across on the backs of the kokanee.
I remember that as well. I was born in Vernon, what, 40 miles away, something like that, Vernon Jubilee Hospital. But I left when I was 2 weeks old because I didn't think I was getting anywhere. We're here to talk to you about free money. And if you're in business, if you're not in business, it doesn't matter much, okay? If you're, but you might be working for a business that does. Maybe you're working for a company that develops software. And I'm going to go on record as saying that myself and Richard Pitt, who's sitting right over there and produces this program, and without Richard, it would not happen because he's the guy that pushes me to do it every week. Richard, and he's also the very first, he and his partner Stuart Lynn were the first people to have a commercial internet service provider in Canada, Whimsy.com. Richard and I spent a whole year documenting the development of our software program and then never bothered filing the tax credit. So you are a specialist who goes around to make sure the businesses that qualify get their free money.
David, you lost money because you didn't fill out the forms that the government needs in order to write you a check.
Well, I understand that. I know that. But I have to admit also that we were having so many other hassles in our life at the moment that the last thing we wanted to do was start another one by putting an application in for a scientific research tax credit. And you'll remember that even though we had a perfectly legitimate and straight-up scientific research tax credit, there were thousands of them out there that people were just committing absolutely fraudulent acts.
I am aware.
Putting them in, and God, it was almost like you were a rum runner or something or other to put in an application for a brief period of time. But they've cleaned that all up, it seems.
They've gone to, the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, has gone to great lengths to make the SR&ED program, the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Income Tax Program, accountable. So there are today much less in the way of inconsistencies than there used to be. Stated positively, Canada now has a much more uniform application processing mechanism, organization, than it did in the past. So it's more likely today that a BC software developer will get, if a BC software developer gets SR&ED money, the same thing would apply if he were doing it in Ontario or in Newfoundland. So it's consistent across the country.
Pretty consistent, because there were all sorts of people setting up limited liability partnerships to buy the credits from somebody and getting refunds, and there were literally $50 million and $100 million things that were proven never to have happened. But the government was issuing the checks. So what do I do? And let's get it straight too. You worked for the government for a while, didn't you?
I did.
You did, for what, 4 or 5 years?
4 years.
And I'm trying to remember a little bit of the story as I read it. You were at a demonstration or a lecture or something at Okanagan College?
I was sitting beside the Dean of Science. Well, the government it took an hour to explain what the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Income Tax Credits are all about. And I listened attentively. I didn't know in advance what it was all about, but I listened attentively and then thought, gosh, this has been rather confusing. And I said to the Dean of Science, on my left-hand side. I said, "Do you understand what this fellow has been trying to tell us for the last hour?" And the dean said, "Not a chance. I didn't understand a thing." So that was my cue. I went up to the government presenter and I said, "I know I can help you make this a lot simpler." And a month later, I had quit teaching at the university and was essentially full-time assisting Canada Revenue Agency to determine the eligibility of SR&ED claims in software predominantly, but electronics and a few other technologies as well.
So you actually worked for the government approving whether or not a project qualified to qualify for the credit.
That's right, and sometimes disapproving.
Disapproving of it.
And so we had to come up with, the government hired 24 of us quasi-academics to interpret the rather vague rules initially and make our own collective decisions on how to implement the decisions according to the Income Tax Act.
Okay.